Okay, so I have I've spread a layer of straw over the grass clippings and mixed in some pine needles. And many of the um, master gardeners will tell you when you're learning to compost that you need to make layers. Even some of the garden books, I've seen it in Sunset and other garden books, they will explain that you need to make layers in your compost pile, um, which is right. And so that way you can measure how to get how you want to match the carbon and nitrogen, so you can tell how much of whatever it is you're doing in your compost pile. But the second thing that often doesn't get said is once you've layered something in a compost pile, so that you can see what you've got, you need to mix it. And if you're doing backyard gardening and you've got a small compost pile, ideal size for a compost pile is 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, 1 cubic yard. That's an ideal size. And if you take, I think there's some videos that other composters have shown on YouTube here that shows that it's real simple to make and I've done it in the past, make a compost pile using pallets. And 4 pallets makes a perfect size compost pile for a backyard. If you are composting in a urban area, a city area, then you really need to pay attention to the smell. If it's not worked, if you don't work the compost pile, pull it out, mix the pile up, then it will mat, like I was talking about earlier with the grass clippings. It mats and then mold forms, and the mold causes the odor. When you mix it, that allows air circulation, and air circulation is one of the key components of making a compost pile work right. So you have to have carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and moisture, water. Those 4 things. And if you do it, if you work your compost pile every 3 or 4 days, by saying what I mean by working it, I mean by pulling it out and putting it back. You pull it out and put it back. That adds the air. If you do that every 3 or 4 days, then in about 2 weeks to 3 weeks, you'll have usable compost. It will a well-prepared compost pile will decompose to a usable form of organic matter that can be put back into the soil. That will happen within 2 to 3 weeks. If you don't turn your pile, and many composters do that. A lot of people that just do leaf mold, they'll take oak leaves or some other kind of leaf and just make a big pile of leaves. And if you're going to do compost in that way, it takes up to a year for it to get down to where you can. And I always call that, I don't call that compost, I call it leaf mold. But it does the same thing. It adds the mycorrhizae back into the soil. It adds nutrients back into the soil and organic matter into the soil, which are all important components in a soil that you're going to grow things in for use, whether it's flowers or food. So if you're doing leaf molds and if you're not working your pile, it'll take up to a year, maybe even longer, for it to break down enough where you can use it. But if you're working a pile and doing all of these things to it that need to happen and understand how it works, you can get usable compost in 2 to 3 weeks. My pile, because I don't work it every day, I don't work it as often as I should because I get busy here doing other things, it can take me 3 to 4 months to get a usable compost. This is I don't know how well you can see this, but this compost here is off of the pile that's finished, and I'm just gonna move the pile over to I'll move the pile over to the pile that needs to be screened, and then I can use that bin which is the bin right here that has the wooden slats. On the other side of that is the one I call the pile that's almost ready. This pile here is the working pile, and that's what I'm going to do here in a moment. Is I'm going to start. I have I call it a hay fork. It's not a pitchfork. It's a hay fork, I call it. First saw one of these on an Amish farm in the Midwest. They use this to pull the pile off of a wagon when they harvest, whether it's usually for harvesting oats or wheat or one of the grasses. And I use it to pull the pile back away from the back of the bin to the front of the bin, and then I use a pitchfork if I'm working by hand. Now I think I've shown you in another video that I don't use I don't do this that often. I use a tool that's a machine because I do such large quantities, enough for all of the gardeners here on this campus to come and get the compost that they need. So I use a machine, a gas-powered machine to actually do this. But sometimes I'm down here and I just work the pile by hand. This is a 4-tined manure fork, and most people just call it a pitchfork. You can get this in different numbers of tines. Usually the tines are a little over a foot long, 16 or 17 inches long. And it's a very good tool for tossing the pile back towards the back of the bin. I always leave this bin here open-faced. That way the gardeners, when they bring their supplies down, their hedge trimmings and grass clippings and leaf litter and stuff like that, that they pile into their gators. They each have a looks like a golf cart with a dump truck on the back of it. It's a small go-kart size, a little bit bigger than a go-kart. You see them on golf courses and that sort of thing. They'll load their garden debris in the back of it and bring it, and they can back right in here and just dump it. All the ones we have here on campus have dump trucks, dump beds on them. So it makes it easy and convenient for them to do that. So that's why this one always stays. There's no boards that go in front of this one. This other one, and I've shown you before. I think I have a couple of other videos that show me removing these boards. This one I put these boards across there. The boards are here, and as I stack the pile up, I bring the boards across to hold the stuff so it doesn't fall out into the ground. It makes a nice even pile. And this pile, you can see, is a good 2 feet from the top. From the top of the pile to the top of the bin is a good 2 feet. When I put this in here and put the boards in place, this bin was all the way to the top. And as it decomposes and settles, the pile settles down, and the organic matter, the cellulite of the cellulose of the tree trimmings or whatever is in there, decompose. It takes up less space, and so the whole pile shrinks. Now I'll pull this out one more time, and I'll use the machine to do that, and I'll put it back over here on this side and mix it with what I've got going on here, and then I'll fill this back up again, and I'll put these boards back in place. And after 3 days of it standing, I can remove those boards and this pile will stay where I put it. So 3 to 4 days of a pile, it's almost like it forms this brick sort of thing. It doesn't collapse. It stays where you put it. So if I needed to, I could just pull this out by hand. So I'll film here while I turn this so you can see what I do. And like I told you, I'll pull this out. You can see I don't know if you can see it how well you can see it on there, but there's steam coming up out of here. So it's at least 120 or 130 degrees down in here in the middle of it, where this nitrogen and where the carbon and nitrogen. I don't know how well you can see this too. You probably can't see it very well. there's some white, looks like powder. That's pretty prevalent in there, and it's a mycorrhizae, which is the rooting bodies of funguses. So the mycorrhizae are actually, in most cases, not all cases, in a lot of cases, the mycorrhizae is beneficial to the soil, and it helps other rooting structures, especially in large trees, to take up nutrient. So I'm going to mix this up, and then I'll use my pitchfork. One of the things that happens, and the biology, botany classes are fascinated by this, is this is a milk carton. And I don't know how well you can see this, but the milk carton, the cardboard paper part of the milk carton is gone, and all that's left is an outer plastic film that was on the that they used to cover and make the cardboard waterproof. So plastics don't decompose. Glass, plastic, most aluminums don't decompose in a compost pile. So as I'm turning, I pull these things out of there. Other heavy metals, solid metals, not heavy metals, brass keys, things like that. This takes too long for them to break down. So I just pull them out of the pile as I'm working the pile. And then when I said the pile that's ready to screen, we screen that pile partly to get those things out of the compost, because we don't want to put plastics and things like that back into the soil. There are some newer formulations for plastic where the plastic actually decomposes, and so it's I don't know, it's controversial over what you put back in the soil, which you don't. I try to keep everything organic.